Now, I'm sure you've heard the term HTTP method before, but if not, that's what we're going to be talking about today. The differences between the main 4 HTTP methods, how they work, what they are, and how we can send them on the front end and how we can receive them on the back end. So let's get into it, talking about HTTP methods. So what exactly is an HTTP method? Well, an HTTP method is a way for a request that is being sent from the front end to the back end to specify the main reason for its existence. Let me explain. So whenever you want to get a specific web page, maybe you're logging in to Twitter and you want to go to twitter.com. Well, you're going to type that into your browser, and then your browser is going to send a GET request because it is requesting that you get that specific web page. It wants to get that page and pull it down to your machine. Now, let's say that you're on Twitter, you're browsing Twitter, and you decide to post something. Now, whenever you click the send button to post that post, it's going to send it from your machine to the server, and that is going to generate a post request because you are going to be sending it from the machine to Twitter servers. Now, you may get something back, maybe a confirmation of some sort, and of course that is going to be sent from the server back to your machine. But the main purpose of that post request is to send your post from your machine to Twitter. Now, there are 2 other main type of requests, one being the put request and the other being the delete request. Now, a put request is an update request. The put request is going to be updating something on the server. So maybe you're going to be updating your marital status on Facebook, and you're not really posting anything, rather you are updating something. So the put request is going to be much more suited for that specific type of request rather than a post request that is adding something new to the server. And then of course the delete request is pretty self-explanatory. It's a request to delete something. Maybe you want to delete a specific post on Twitter, or you want to delete something entirely from the website. You are going to send a delete request. Now, Express has the ability to actually differentiate between these specific requests. So if we want to create a path here, we would have to say app dot and then whatever the specific method that is being used for that specific path. So maybe we want to specify the main path for the website, so the default path for the website. We could say app.get, and get is going to be the method that is being utilized whenever we are getting something, and we are going to get the default route, the main route for that website. And then inside of the callback function is where we can do whatever we need to. We can maybe get information from a server, maybe we can authenticate someone, and then we can send all of that information back to the client using the request and the response objects that are provided in each one of these requests. Now, we can also make other different requests as well, and these can have the exact same path as well. So we could create 4 or 5 different requests just on this one single path, just by specifying a different method. So we could say app.post, and we could also specify the slash route. Maybe we want to post a new user or whatever to the website, and we could do that just like this by specifying that we want to post something instead of getting something, even though it is on the exact same route. And we can set this up the exact same way, and these will be differentiated between their different requests. And this is how we can create RESTful APIs as well, because a RESTful API is just an API that abides by these different methods, because technically you could use just get and post for everything. You didn't have to even utilize all of the other different methods, but that's not following good REST conventions, because you want to make sure that you are specifying exactly how these things work and what these things are doing whenever they are sending these requests. Because if you had a bunch of post requests that were deleting things or updating things, you would get very confused very quickly by all of the different post requests. So you want to try to abide by these RESTful conventions by using all of the different methods that you can based on what you need each method or request to do. Now that's enough of me talking. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we can send some of these requests from the front end to the back end. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start the server. And then I just want to add a quick side note here is you can easily automatically restart your server if you utilize a package called nodemon. Now if you go to the npmjs.com website and search for nodemon, you'll find the documentation and how you can install it. But I would recommend that you install this globally. That means you have it available on your entire machine and you can run it wherever you want on your machine. I would recommend you install this package, especially if you're going to be working with Express a lot, because it will automatically restart the server anytime it detects a change on the specific path you're working on. So right now I am in the code directory here and it's got all of these files and everything inside of it. So if I run nodemon here, and I specify the file that I want it to run, so in this case it would be the index.js file here. I can specify the index.js file, and it's going to start the server. It's going to run this file. It's basically saying the exact same thing as node index.js, but what it's going to do is it's going to watch these specific extensions, and whenever something changes, you're going to see restarting due to changes, starting node index.js, and then you can see that the server is now running again. This is just a quick little tip just in case you didn't know, so that you can utilize this package and you don't have to restart your server every single time. This is what I'm going to be using from now on because it's a pain to restart your server every single time you make a change. But let's go ahead and create these requests. So I've created a basic front end here. Again, this is a basic front end. If you want to see the code, it's right here. Nothing special whatsoever, just a form with an action that is going to our server. So it's going to our 127.0.0.1 with the port of 3000, which is the port that we are listening on over here is 3000. And it's just going to the default / route. And then I specified the method as get because the first method that we are going to utilize is the get method. So let's go ahead and take a look at this request. Now let's go ahead and fill out the form here. We'll put in our name and our email, and we'll go ahead and submit the form. Now down here at the bottom, you could probably see that we got a GET request was logged out to the console. And that was logged out from right here where we hit that GET route with the path of /, and we just logged out that we got a GET request to the console. But how do we see that information that we just sent to the backend on the backend? Well, we can actually utilize the request.body. So let's go ahead and just console.log the request.body. And if we now submit our request again, we can see that we get undefined. Why are we getting undefined? Well, there's a specific reason for this, and this specifically comes because Express needs to know how to parse it. Express has no idea automatically how to parse form data that is coming from a client. So we have to tell Express to parse the form data. And the way that we can do that is we can utilize the app.use method. Now, what the app.use method does is it is a middleware that allows us to do something to every single request as it comes in. So let's see how this works. We're going to say app.use, and then we're going to specify express.use URL encoded, and this is a method that we can call. Now, this is a method that is going to parse any URL encoded information coming from a client. Basically, this is just meaning that it's going to parse form data, and by default, form data is URL encoded, and we need to pass in one value here. We need to pass in the extended. We need to set that to true, and what this is going to do is it's basically going to say we want to be able to parse everything that comes into form data, not just one or two specific things, because by default this is set to false, and with that being set to false, only strings and arrays can be parsed from this. Nothing else can actually be parsed. So we need to set the extended to true so that we can parse everything else as well. Now, if we go ahead and send that request again, we click submit. Now we are going to get an empty object. What in the world is going on? Why do we keep getting these random things that is not our data? What in the world is going on here? Well, the reason for this is because we are using the wrong method. Now let me explain here for just a second, because this may not make too much sense. Now, whenever we are specifying that we are sending a get method, the get method is not actually going to have a body attached to it. This is something that is not included on get methods because there's no real reason to add a body to a get method. But the body is available on the post method. But whenever we're sending a get method from the front end to the back end, even if we are adding information to a form and we're submitting that form is never going to actually attach that form data to a request.body because there's no real reason for the request body to be attached to a get method whenever a get method is meant to get information from the server, not be sending information to the server. So the body is never actually attached to a get method. Now, whenever we change this to post here, so we can go ahead and change this to post, now it's going to end up hitting this route down here, and it is going to have a request body because whenever we specify that we're posting something, then that body is going to be attached to that request. So if we now pull this in here and we submit our form, we're going to see we got a post request. Now that was just logged out from this right here because whenever we changed the method from get to post over here, it changed the method that we were sending the request by. So instead of hitting this get route here, when we specify the get method, we're actually specifying the post method now, and it's actually hitting this post route down here now. But we're still not seeing the request body, and that's just simply because we are not actually logging it out inside of this post method. So if we go ahead and log out the request.body inside of the app.post method now, we go ahead and save that, and we go ahead and resubmit our form now, we can now see that we have got name and email inside of the console that was just logged out from this console.log here. So whenever you are sending information to the server, it cannot be sent via a GET request. That is done on the front end because there is no reason to be sending a request body on a GET request. Now, before we go any further, I just want to clear some things up and make sure there's no confusion. Now, you may have noticed over here the action. I specified an absolute path whenever I specified the action. Why did I specify an absolute path, including the HTTP and everything in the front here? Well, this is because we are actually not sending this to the exact same domain that we are hosting our server on. So our server and our front end are both on two separate domains. While the front end is on 127.0.0.1, it's on port 8080, whereas the back end is listening on port 3000. So since it's not being sent to the exact same domain, the port is different. So that means that if I were to specify a relative route it's not actually going to hit our server. It's actually going to get rejected, and it's not actually going to hit our server. So I have to specify that we are going to this absolute path whenever I create this action here. Now, the method here, if you notice, it's all in caps. The method here is all in caps simply because this is just a standard convention. Generally, you'll specify the method all in caps. It is not case sensitive. You can put it in lowercase, and if I actually utilize autocomplete, that's what it's going to do, is put it in lowercase. But it's a convention to make sure it is in caps. It's not a necessity, but it's something that you will see more often than in lowercase. Now, there's one more thing that I want to clear up before we move on, and that is this express app.use. Now, over here in the Express application, I specified this app.use method. Now, I said that this is a middleware, and that is true. App.use is considered a middleware, but technically everything in Express is considered a middleware, because middleware is defined as anything that happens between the request and the response. So anything that happens between the request being sent to the server and the response being sent back to the client is technically considered middleware. But this is what is considered Express middleware, and this is something that happens before it actually hits a route. So you may have 1, 10, 20 different middleware that something has to go through before it actually hits a route on the back end here. And that's okay. That is normal. Middleware is something that is going to be done to every single request. As long as it's specified before one of these routes, the middleware is going to do something to every single request that it passes through. So you may again have 5, 10, 20, 30 different pieces of middleware that a request has to go through before it hits one of the routes, and it will go through every single one of those. As long as it's defined before the route that is supposed to hit, it's going to go through that specific middleware. So this is exactly what this is doing. This is going to catch every single request that comes in, and it's basically just going to check to see if it is URL encoded data, and if it is, then it's going to parse it for you and then send it along to the next place that it needs to be sent to. And if it's not, then it's just going to send it on to the next place it needs to be sent to. So it's going to only work on those specific things that it needs to work on, but it's going to take a look at every single request that comes in. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's take a look at the last two methods, the put and delete method. So we can specify the app.put method and the app.delete method. And these two methods, of course, this is the updating method and this is, of course, the deleting method. Now, there is a third option that I didn't specify, and that's simply because the third option is the app.patch method. And the app.patch method is nearly the same as the app.put method, but there's a small distinct difference between these two. But for the most part, these work nearly the exact same. But we will talk about the differences between these two later on towards the end of the video, but for now, we're just going to talk about these two right here. So the app.put is, of course, the updating method, and then delete is of course, the deleting method. Now, these work exactly the same as the post and get methods up here, so we can specify the route that we want to listen on. So we can, of course, listen on the slash route again if we want, and we can, of course, get the request and the response from this callback function here, and we can specify whatever we need to inside of the callback function here, and the same goes for the delete method here as well. Now, the weird part about this is that the front end, if you are utilizing a form like we did before, like this form right here, if you are utilizing a form, the form actually doesn't support these other types of methods. The only types that the form supports is the get and post method. So if you want to use a form on the front end for one of these other types of requests, we have to kind of find a workaround for that. And luckily, we do have a workaround. Now, this workaround that I was talking about about is actually another package that we can download from the npm.js website. So we can actually install this package just like we would install any other package, and this is called the method override package. So we can say npm I method dash override, and this is going to install the method override package. Now what this does is we can specify on the front end that we're sending a post request, and it's going to send a normal post request like nothing is ever changed for it. But whenever we specify the action, we are going to add to the query string a specific parameter that is going to get caught by a middleware by this package, and it's going to convert it to the correct type that we want to send. So we can actually send these types of requests using the fetch method on the front end, but we can't use these types of methods on forms, and this is where this package comes into play. So let's go ahead and head up here and include this package. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a constant, and we need to require this package. Just like we require Express, we need to require this package. So we're going to say method override is going to be equal to require the method dash override package, just like that. Now we need to utilize this inside of a middleware. So we're going to say app.use, and we're going to specify the method override, and we're going to call it. Now we need to specify a specific string in here, and this string is going to be the string that this package is looking out for whenever we send a request. So normally, this is what I normally do, is I call it underscore method, and that's it. That's what it's going to be looking for, is that underscore method. Now if we go ahead and save that, let's go ahead and add our console.logs down here. So I'm just going to add a console.log saying we got a put request. And just like that, we're going to do the exact same thing with the delete, just so we can see which requests we're actually getting. And if we go ahead and save that, now we just need to restart the server. And now that the server is restarted, let's go ahead and head over here to the front end, and let's actually add our method override method on here. So instead of sending an actual post request, we want to send a put request. So we will say query string underscore method is equal to delete or put. So this is the query string, and this is the method, the underscore method string that is looking for right over here. So we specify the underscore method, and then we set the actual method here that we want to use. So we're technically sending it as a post, and then we're just including on the query string the actual method that we want to utilize once we get to the back end. So once we get this to the back end, then it's going to see that underscore method inside of the query string. So it's going to parse that and change that from a post request to a put request. So if we now take a look at our front end here, and we send that data on using the front end, we are going to see we got a put request logged out to the console down here. And this is going to be the exact same thing for a delete request. So instead of sending a post request, well, technically we are going to send a post request, but it's going to be changed to a delete request once it gets to the back end. So it's considered a post request up until it gets here, and then the method override package is going to see that underscore method, and it's going to change it to whatever value comes next, whatever value it's set equal to. So if we save that now, we don't actually need to save that, but if we go ahead and submit that now, you can see again we get a delete request now. And this is exactly how the method override package works. But the good thing is that we don't always need to utilize this. So if you're just using maybe the fetch method, if you're writing a script on the front end with the fetch method, you don't actually have to utilize that package because the fetch method supports all of the other different types of HTTP methods. But the form and maybe a couple of other places may not support anything other than a get or a post, and this is where you will need to utilize the method override package. But now that I'm done ranting about the method override package, you could see earlier that we got the app.delete and the app.put. As soon as those were converted, those were received properly by Express on the back end here, where the put method was only accepted by the app.put and the delete method was only accepted by the app.delete. And these are the four main different types of HTTP methods that we can utilize on the front end and on the back end. But there is another type of HTTP method. There's actually a few other types, but there's one more type that we're going to talk about today, and that is the patch method. Now, as I said before, the patch method is very similar to the put method. Now, the difference between the put and the patch method all comes down to how the data is updated, because the put method is mainly meant to update the entire record rather than just updating a small part of the record, whereas the patch method is mainly meant to update a small part of the record. So maybe you would use the put method for something along the lines of maybe you have a package on the npmjs.com website and you want to update that package. You want to completely revamp and update that package. So that package is already on the website and you have completely changed that package and are updating that entire package. So instead of going through and changing every single line, what it's going to do instead is just going to take the whole thing that you're uploading now and completely replace the one on the server with the one you're updating. So it's going to delete the old one and replace it with the new one. Whereas the patch method would be something like updating your last name on a social media site. So maybe you got married and your last name has changed or whatever, and now all of a sudden you're just changing one small piece of your social media profile. You're not changing the whole profile. You're not re-updating the entire profile. You're just changing one small piece of your profile. So that is an example of what a patch would do, whereas if you're completely replacing the whole thing, that is going to utilize a put. Now, technically, it really doesn't matter, but if you want to follow RESTful standards for a RESTful API, then you definitely want to know the difference between a put and a patch. And that is about it for the HTTP methods and the method override package. Now, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments section down below. I know we went over all kinds of different information today, so make sure you post any comments you have down in the comments section. I will answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, if you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it. Check out the full playlist, link is right down there. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.